we are here today to have a webinar on modes of writing and instructional practices for the 2024 ELA standards for our middle level students. You may have joined us for the session we had on elementary, or this could be your first one with us and you're strictly middle level, but either way, we are happy you are here and are open to questions. If you have any questions as we're going through, you can unmute, you can put them in the chat. We're here to help. So we'll start with some housekeeping introductions. If I haven't met you, my name is Brenna McCormick, and I am the Middle Level Education Associate at the State Department of Education in the Office of Assessment and Standards for ELA Standards. With me today, I have my colleague, Mandy. She is our Elementary Education Associate, and she will be kind of monitoring the chat, helping troubleshoot if you have any issues, opening anything or accessing anything, and helping us keep things muted and no echoing and all the things. So she's here to support us. So thank you, Mandy, for being here this morning. I would like to know who you are before we get started. Who do we have in our virtual space today? So if you will, go ahead and put in the chat your name, your district, maybe what role you serve or what levels you teach. Awesome. I see some coaches, some ELA teachers. We've got some district level staff with us, instructional specialist, Rainbow Lake Middle. I've never heard of that, but what a fun name. All over the state. I love this. Excellent. Hey, we've got folks from Marion, Darlington, Allendale. Wonderful. Thank you for taking a moment to let me know who you are and who we have here in the space. I am excited to work with you all this morning. Spartanburg too. Awesome. And apparently there was some issues with people getting links this morning. I don't know why. So just so you know, if you see me a little bit distracted, it's because people are emailing me and I'm trying to get them the appropriate link to today's meeting. Hey, Melinda. All right. So I do have a landing page for you today that you will need to access. I'm going to put that in the chat.
18.
And let's make sure we're on mute. Thank you. If you will go ahead and open up that landing page, it will have links for today's work that we're doing and additional resources that you may want to reference later after the webinar today. If you have any issues opening that up, just put a comment in the chat. Mandy can help you with that. But go ahead, take a moment, and get that landing page open. We do want to let you know that there is a feedback form at the end of our session today that we will ask that you complete. This is how we will take your attendance for being here today, and it's also how we'll issue your recertification credit for being here today. So just keep an eye out at the very end today. You will want to complete the feedback form so that you can receive your recertification. And finally, we always like to mention our high quality instructional materials or the curriculum that you have adopted within your district. A variety of curriculum has been adopted. And we always encourage you to refer back to that high quality instructional material when planning. You want to make sure that you are teaching your indicators and your standards first and looking at those high quality instructional materials. And then what we're providing today will be a supplement to those. So we want to make sure that we know that the work that we're doing today is supplemental and not in place of any curriculum that you may have adopted. We do have a couple of norms as we get started. We would like for you to engage. We know that this time of year is incredibly busy, so we thank you for your attendance and your participation. I've already seen that someone's having a fire drill this morning. We get that. If there is anything in your school or your classroom that you need to handle or address, by all means, please do that. But while you're here in the meeting, we do ask that you're engaged. We have tried to be very thoughtful in our planning of today's session. I'm sorry, I'm hearing feedback. There we go. Make sure that everybody is muted. Okay. We've tried to be very thoughtful in our planning of today's session to prioritize our time and to dive in to the standards and plan for instruction using the resources and information that we have available for you today. So we ask that you just engage to the best of your ability. We also want you to express. So our time together today will hopefully be a time to learn and try new things as we explore the standards, resources, ideas for planning and instruction. Please express any thinking or questions or concerns that you have as we go through our work today. We want to ensure that you walk away feeling confident in what we have learned and discussed. And then finally, embrace. As with all new standards, there are shifts in thinking and planning and doing. So we ask that you embrace the new and be open to trying things that may be different than what you have done in the past. Okay, I mentioned your recertification credit earlier. We will be offering 2 hours of recertification credit for your participation today. All you have to do is be here live, which check mark, you've done that. Participate, remain in attendance for the duration of our work today, and then complete that feedback form as your confirmation for being here. Okay, all the housekeeping done, let's get started. Our purpose today is to explain the expectations for writing for grades 6 through 8 in our new ELA standards and then equip you with the tools to help make writing instruction clear, intentional, and manageable. We want it to be clear for both teachers and students. Intentional is to ensure that we're aligning our language and our instructional practices to the language of the indicators. And then manageability is really where we want to support you the most. How can we ensure that the indicators are being mastered by all students in a variety of ways? So take a moment to consider this quote. I want to give you a second to read it. And then in the chat, if you will tell me, what was your learning experience? Do you remember being taught to write? So I'll give you about 2 minutes and then you can drop your responses in the chat. So I'm seeing a lot of responses. Cheryl says she remembers cursive, like learning handwriting, like physical writing. Some people said, I'm sure I did, but I don't remember. A lot of people were assigned writing. Yes, and I have that, explicitly taught the grammar, right? Punctuation. And I have a very similar experience. I remember my 7th grade ELA teacher, Ms. Zier, who taught me how to write sentences. And I remember my high school teachers who assigned a lot of writing and gave a lot of feedback after my writing was done. Yes, the red pen, right? Grammar heavy. Absolutely. I hated writing, but I loved grammar. That's funny, Barbara. I was given tasks but was never taught the process. Absolutely. And so that is a common experience for us as teachers. So I wonder if sometimes we bring that into the way that we teach in our classrooms. So today we're going to think about, how do we actually teach the writing process in a way that is clear and manageable. One more quote for you. Consider this. Research on current writing practices in the US and globally indicates that the majority of teachers are not dedicating sufficient time to teach students how to write. So if you put yourself on a scale to -3 being much too little to +3 being much too much, how much time do you spend in the classroom on writing instruction? Thanks, Latasha. Yeah, -2. Joanna, similar. All right. Oh, okay. Some people are on the too much side. I like it. I wish there was more time to do so and focus heavily. 3 to 4 times a week in some shape or form. Anne says, most of my class, since I'm the writing resource teacher, that makes sense. Tabitha, thank you. -2. Wish there was more time to balance reading and writing. Yep. Barbara, that's awesome. An extra 30 minutes for just writing in the school every day. And Melissa, yeah, so for overall, most teachers in the school, -2. And that also is very common. I am the same way. I think I did a lot of, when I was in the classroom, maybe a lot of writing about my reading or like quick responses. When when I was teaching, I would have students turn and jot for just, write a sentence or two about what you read. But as far as maybe writing process instruction went, it was much too little. And so today we're going to explore a couple of strategies that you can use to maybe infuse intentional writing practices more frequently in the classroom. And so know that there's a lot of reasons that explicit writing instruction is often like unprioritized or maybe pushed to if we have time. And a lot of that is time constraints. That's what I'm seeing in the chat, right? That there's just not time for all of the things that we are expected to teach. Sometimes teachers may have the perception that, oh, the writing skill, that's going to develop naturally. The more they read, the better writers they will be. And while that's true, students still need explicit instruction. Sometimes it comes down to teacher confidence. If we weren't necessarily taught to write, and then there wasn't, a methods course on teaching kids to write in college, how do we do that? And then also, we can't forget that obviously we have diverse student abilities in our classrooms. We could go on and on with the reasons that writing is often unprioritized or kind of moved to the if we have time space. But we want to explore today how to shift writing into a priority position. So here's our agenda. We are going to briefly go over written and oral communications, the strands that we find our writing modes in. Then we will look specifically at the 3 modes, and then we're going to give you some really great takeaway and immediately use strategies for expanding writing in your classroom. Okay, so with our new standards, you have your foundations of literacy, your applications of reading, research, and then written and oral communications, and that is where our writing modes live. So we're going to take just a moment to think a little bit more deeply about that strand of written and oral communications. I have for you in the chat, and I believe this is also linked on your landing page, a section from our explanation of strands document that you can find in the standards document. And I want to give you a minute just to read the portion about written and oral communications or written communications and complete this chart that you'll find on number 1 on your landing page. I want you to identify one piece of information that's good for teachers to know, one piece of information that is important for teachers to know, and one piece of information that is essential for teachers to know. So essentially, I want you to pick 3 things that are important and rank them into, yeah, that's good to know, but this is required to know. I'm going to give you about 7 minutes. All right, I see several people finishing up. So what we're going to do now is sort of a virtual turn and talk. I'm going to ask you in a moment to put in your one piece of information that you consider to be essential for teachers to know. And after everyone has submitted their essential information, I'm going to ask you to find someone else's response and just reply to them. So you will reply directly to someone else's response, and that's how we'll turn and talk. So you can go ahead now, take that one piece of essential information that you have identified and drop that in the chat. So as they're coming in, once you have popped your essential information, go back, read someone else's and give them a comment. Maybe agree with them, add on, expand. Reading through you all's comments makes me want to change my essential, like, oh yes, that's essential also. That's essential also. So a couple of things that I'm noticing. If I had picked one, it would have been that the standards and grade level indicators are not intended to be taught in isolation. Rather, they're designed to be grouped in clusters. I also think it's essential to know that writing includes the processes of revision and editing. It's important to know what each of the 3 modes are and how those modes are different. That writing is recursive and interconnected, and it develops over time. Love all the references to the mentor text. Absolutely. So now that you have an idea a little bit of what those expectations are for written communication in our standards, let's look at the strand itself. So this is what we refer to as the standards map. You can find this at the beginning of your standards document, and it includes all of the strands. We're specifically honing in on written and oral communications right now. You'll see that there are 9 standards and 9 indicators for writing. The first 5 seen highlighted here are the writing standards, so the actual process of writing. The other 4 standards include handwriting, communicating ideas, collaboration and perspective, and then evaluating ideas. But today our focus is just on the first 3, which are the 3 modes of writing. So you've got argumentative writing, informative or expository writing, and then narrative. So I want you to stop and jot for just a second. This is number 2 on your landing page. Take a moment to think about what you already know about each mode of writing. Maybe 2 or 3 characteristics that you would consider for each mode. I have not seen the glossary for our standards. I'm going to put that in the chat for you and let you know that it is one of the most valuable resources and tools that are available when it comes to instructing the new standards. It is a tool that we hand wrote all the definitions for. You're not going to find any Webster's definitions in there. It was crafted to align directly with our South Carolina standards and indicators, and to the intent of how we or our writing committee wanted those standards and indicators to be taught. So that is an excellent tool. And what I'm going to do right now is show you what the glossary says about these 3 pieces of writing. So you have your opinion or argumentative, informative or expository, and then your narrative. So take a moment, look at these definitions, and see how they align with the characteristics that you put down. If there are any similarities or differences that you noticed, go ahead and drop those in the chat. Counterclaim, the rebuttal, evidence, centering around central ideas, topics, themes. Yes, figurative language to better students' narrative writing. That's right there in that glossary definition. Are these? Mm, Melinda, that's a great question. So anything that the language that you would see on SC Ready is the language that you'll see in the indicator itself. So if the indicator says, just an example that comes to my head, central idea, that's the language that'll be on SC Ready, not main idea, if that makes sense. And that's another thing to notice too about this glossary versus maybe your high quality instructional materials, is to make sure they align, so that the words that you're using are the or and the definitions that you're using are what's in our glossary and what's in our indicators, as opposed to maybe what it's called in your curriculum. You'll want to make sure you're using the South Carolina language. Great question. Okay, so if it's in the, okay, so Mandy, will you put in the assessment specifications link? So Mandy's going to put in a document or a link to some documents called the assessment specifications. Our role is really the standards themselves. We have counterparts who handle all of our assessment questions, but we do have that document that kind of lists out what is assessed or assessable and how that might look on your SC Ready. So Mandy's going to put that link in the chat, and I'll also see if I can go back and add it to the landing page. And also the information to our assessment counterparts who can answer some of those more specific assessment questions. Um, if you've looked at the standards, the new ones, you've probably noticed the overarching expectations, which are just how we do business in ELA. These are the skills and processes that we expect to see in every classroom, really, not just ELA, but every classroom. But I want you to look at these overarching expectations and see if you can notice where is writing. Obviously, it's in overarching expectation one, right? Read and write for a variety of purposes. But think for a second about overarching expectation number 5, cite evidence to explain and justify reasoning. Yes, Karine, you got it. What mode of writing does that line up with really well? Argumentative or informative, even. Yes. All right. What about overarching expectation 3? Making inferences to support comprehension. Narrative, that's what I would say as well. Writing those narrative pieces. What about number 2? I saw a lot of people say number 2. Acquiring, refining, and sharing knowledge. Informative, right? So you can see that easily writing is interwoven into really all of our overarching expectations as well. So that's something to keep in mind as we are planning for using these overarching expectations. How can writing maybe be the vessel for those overarching expectations? All right, so that's kind of an overview of the written and oral communication strand as far as the 3 modes of writing are concerned. We're going to look a little more deeply at each mode here in just a second. But first, we're going to do a 3L reflection in your landing page, number 3. In so far today, what have you learned? What do you love? And what questions are still lingering? So take a moment to put that on your landing page, and then I'll have you respond in the chat in just a second. All right, pick one response, either your learn, love, or lingering, and drop that in the chat. The glossary. Yay. Yes, look, you're talking about the glossary too. Over and over again, hearing how important it is for our instruction to mirror the language of the indicators and glossary. Yes. We had a great conversation yesterday. Um, Someone asked, is it really that big of a deal if I said main idea versus central idea, right? Don't they mean the same thing? And I would argue yes, because students sometimes are very black and white, right? And if you teach the main idea and then they see central idea, that's not the same thing. They don't know what you're talking about. All of a sudden, you've never taught them that, right? So using that intentional language is so, so important. And using that same the same terms in all subjects. Sunshine, first of all, what a name. I love it. But yes, and we actually met with our social studies counterparts when we were developing our glossary to ensure that some of the language that we might use aligns with how they define things as well. Specific strategies, we got those for you coming up. Reading and writing not being separated. Yay. Handwriting, yeah. All right. So I'm glad that you've learned something and that you love something already. We'll go back and look through this chat, and if there are any specific questions that haven't been answered, by the end, we'll make sure we get those answers to you as well. So let's dive into the three modes of writing and look a little bit more closely at the specific expectations. All right, so this is a lot on the slide. Don't worry, we're going to break it down. We're starting with narrative, which is actually communications 3.1. This particular example you see on the screen is grade pop quiz. What grade is it? How can you tell? I saw some people mouthing it. Yes, sixth grade, right? So this is your sixth grade indicator for narrative writing. You probably a time or two have been asked to unpack a standard. Give me an emoji in the chat if you've ever unpacked standards. Oh, yes. It's kind of become a four-letter word, right? That idea of unpacking the standards. The good news is that our standards now don't really need to be unpacked. They come unpacked, right? They are really clear, concise, to the point. So what we're going to do right now is deconstructing these indicators, not to unpack them per se, but to really focus our instruction and use indicator language really to make a list of like mini lessons. So I'm going to walk you through that with narrative writing, and then we're going to do informative and expository writing together. And then you guys are going to go into breakout rooms and do argumentative writing on your own. So that's kind of what's coming up next. So deconstructing indicators, we really just very simply want to break out the skills and the content. So if we look at this particular indicator, we know that students are being asked to write narratives, right? So that's the skill, that's the content. So maybe my first mini lesson is let's dive into a whole bunch of narrative mentor text. We got to know what a narrative is before we can write them. Another skill, produce writing appropriate to task and audience. There's a next mini lesson. How do we identify what the task is asking and how it aligns to our audience? We are also asked to establish context. So how do we help students establish context in their narrative writing? And do they even know what context is, right? You'll see in one of the strategies that we give you later, there is a strategy specific for developing context. So that's good. They have to introduce a narrator and characters. You've got to have an organized plot structure. Use dialogue and description. Dialogue's a big deal. We have to teach that explicitly. Use precise words and phrases. Use descriptive details. Use figurative language, and then provide an ending. So we have not done anything miraculous here, anything like newsworthy, but we've pared down that indicator into just the specific skill and content. And if you wanted, you now have 10 mini lessons that you could move forward with and walk students through a narrative piece. Or embed that instruction while you're reading narratives. Hey, look what this author did to establish context. Let's try that real quick. We don't have to write the entire narrative. We can just write the introduction and practice developing context. So this idea of deconstructing indicators isn't necessarily to unpack them to understand them, because they're pretty understandable, but it's to narrow down our thinking, right? And sometimes the simplest things are the most mind-blowing, right? The simplest things are like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So now we're going to look at your informative and expository writing. So in the chat, I would love for you to take a look at this eighth grade indicator, C.21, so our informative writing, and give me some skills and content. Break that down for me, as simple as you can. Write informative text. Yay! Analyze information. Introduce a topic. Provide a concluding statement. Develop the topic. Organize ideas. Structure. Use transitions. Love this. Establish a tone. Exactly. We break it down. Write informative text. Introduce a topic. Organize ideas, concepts, and information. Use a structure. Develop the topic. Use transitions, clarify relationships, use precise language and thoughtful elaboration, establish tone, provide concluding statements or section. So again, 10 mini lessons. Now, it's funny because my team and I each we did this separately, and you will notice that like Mandy, for example, might have broke down organize ideas, organize concepts, organize information, right? Or use precise language, use thoughtful elaboration as two separate. And it really doesn't matter how you do it. The point is that you're really honing in on those essential key skills that students need to be successful in this particular mode of writing. So I see that you're getting it. You're really honing in on those particular skills. So now what we're going to do, we're going to put you in a breakout room in just a moment. Your breakout room will have a name. It might say 6th A, 6th B, 6th C, and through 7th grade and 8th grade. You are going to have a slide deck that looks like this. And if you're in breakout room 6th grade A, you'll see here's 6th and there's A. If you're in 7th grade A, 7th A, so on and so forth. That's the slide your group will be working on. And together as a group, your job is to deconstruct that argumentative indicator for that grade level. Give me a thumbs up if that makes sense. All right. Before we go ahead and take a look at the work you did, I want to discuss the vertical progression of our standards and indicators. So what you see on the screen right now is just an excerpt. It's the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade vertical progression of the argumentative standards. You'll see that in the vertical progression, it starts with 6th grade here at the bottom, moving up to 8th grade. If you looked at the full document, English 4 would be at the top and kindergarten would be at the bottom. This gives you a K through 12 progression for each standard and indicator. And you may notice that there are certain words that are bold. Whenever a word is bold in the vertical progression, which is Appendix B of our standards document, that means that that is new content or a new skill for that grade level. For example, in 6th grade, students have never been taught alternative perspective. So as the 6th grade teacher, you are responsible for introducing and teaching that for the very first time for those students. 7th grade, counterclaim. Alternative perspective turns into counterclaim in 7th grade, and you are responsible for introducing that language to your 7th grade students. 8th grade, your new term here is tone. Students have probably seen tone in other indicators by 8th grade, but this is the first time that they're establishing and maintaining a tone in their own writing for argumentative writing. So in the breakout rooms, you looked only at one grade level indicator. So you were either in 6th grade, you were in 7th grade, or you were in 8th grade. What's the benefit of looking at all grade level indicators in a vertical progression like this one? Go ahead and you can unmute or you can put your answer in the chat.
In the previous year, I mean, you're able to see what they got the previous year moving forward.
Absolutely. What they should have come with, and where they're going. What else? Prior knowledge, what to teach. Nuanced teaching. I love that. What to do next. Think also about your students who may need enrichment or reinforcement, differentiation. That's exactly right, Caroline. You took it out of my mouth. That, hey, I've got a student who's got it. They know what to do. What do I do next? Right? Excellent. All right. As we review the slide deck that you've worked on, I want you to pay close attention to that vertical progression to really see how the expectations of content and rigor develop through 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. I love that word nuanced because that's exactly what it is. It's not that argumentative writing changes super drastically between 6th grade and 8th grade, but there are expectations and rigor in content that slightly change, that are slightly nuanced. So let's look at grade 6. If you were in a 6th grade group, if you would like to unmute and tell me something that you talked about in your group, something you all noticed. It could be group A, B, or C, doesn't matter. What were you thinking about?
I think for us, it just made it clear that, the standards are very packed per se, and that you really have to unpack them and consider the individual lessons that are within each one for students to be successful with the entire indicator.
Absolutely, Alexis. That's great. A great noticing. And I see within these 6th grade indicators that we're, introducing claim, organizing, acknowledging, providing that concluding statement. Again, a lot of the same skills you see in all grade levels, just with a little bit of nuance. So let's think now about 7th grade, someone from my 7th grade groups who might want to unmute and tell me what you all were thinking. We have some shy 7th grade teachers.
Okay, we just kind of looked at the standard and saw how many lessons can be taught using the skills that's already a part of the standard. For example, we used support claims with logical reasoning, and we had a discussion about possibly breaking that apart. But in order to actually support a claim, students would have to know what logical reasoning is and the examples of logical reasoning. Otherwise, they would try to support a claim with illogical reasoning. We don't want that. So we will actually combine those two skills together.
Absolutely. Excellent. And again, if the indicator up at the top had been from the vertical progression, you would notice that counterclaim is bold. So that may be a place that you have to really dig in a little more deeply for 7th grade because that's the first time they've seen that.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, excellent. All right, what about 8th grade?
Eighth grade is the first time you have to refute a claim.
All right. So we're refuting a claim. So that means that that's a place where you'll have to really dig in as an 8th grade teacher. How do you refute a claim? What does that mean? How can we practice that maybe orally before we jump into it in written work? So I hope that you found a process such as this to be helpful and replicatable, replicate. Lost my words. That you can replicate it with a group of teachers that you work with for all of your indicators, not just writing, but really any indicator that we have in our standards, so that you can really drill in to what the expectations and content and rigor are. So before we get into our last section, which is really the meat and potatoes, the thing that you're waiting for, all those instructional strategies that you can walk away with, I want you to take a moment. Oh, I'm ahead of myself. I do want you to remember that the indicators represent end of grade level expectation, right? So no student on day one is expected to be able to do all of these things. And when we were talking about how to use that vertical articulation document for differentiation, this is a great place to think about that. We start where the students are, whether that's backing up a year and moving forward, or sitting right in our grade level because that's where students are and that's what they're ready for. We have this vertical articulation so that you can find the access points for all of your students. Now, I want you to take a moment just to reflect before we hop into our last section. I'm going to have a couple of sentence starters, some prompts, and I would like for you to just choose one and put your response in the chat. So, here are your options. I can use the vertical articulation, the 3 modes of writing, deconstructing indicators. I used to think, but now I know. And my next step is. So just choose one and finish that statement in the chat. Deconstructing indicators has never been easier. I love it. Use that vertical articulation to differentiate for students. Yes. Coaching conversations. I love that. Chastity. Self-evaluation. Bernicia, yes. I'm learning there. Good. All right. Pick one person in the chat to respond to. Do a little virtual turn and talk. Excellent, Deborah. And we'll have, I think, a couple of resources to help you get started. Shelley, yes. I always think that our gifted students are sometimes taken in the back burner. We really focus on the students who need remediation, but it's important to really think about those students who need enrichment. Mm, I love that. Excellent. All right. I'm sure you all are ready for the takeaways. So if you've been with us in any of our other webinars where we've talked about micros, minis, and macros, you'll be familiar with this. But I am going to take just a moment to go over this concept and how we've kind of organized some of the strategies we've developed so that everyone's on that level playing field. So we have what we call micros, minis, and macro experiences. A micro experience would be something that takes less than one class period. So we're thinking a quick write, 5, 10, 15 minutes, maybe just a very quick opportunity to write, a very intentional, quick opportunity to write. We have mini experiences, which might take a whole class period or two. And then you've got your macro experiences, which are those culminating experiences. Probably the first thing that comes to your mind is, your 5-paragraph essay, right? We hope to give you a couple of options that are beyond the 5-paragraph essay because we know that students need to write for a variety of purposes. We know that the explanation of strands tells us that writing should be recursive and interconnected throughout all of our literacy experiences for our students. And that is what we have tried to do through these examples that we're going to share. Also important to note that your writing instruction does not and probably should not focus on all indicators at one time. Argumentative, for example, there were sub indicators through letter F. You can't do all that at once on one day. So it's okay to focus on one or two sub indicators in your instruction. Before we go forward, I would just want to ask, what's the power of having a variety of writing experiences of different lengths, of different genres, of styles of writing? Student engagement. Oh, I love that. Helps build stamina, right? If we can do some micro experiences and then build into mini and then get to the macro. Critical thinking skills to be able to communicate whatever the circumstance. I love that. Because ultimately, we want students to be able to communicate in the real world, right? And 99% of the time, our students aren't going to be writing 5-paragraph essays in the real world, right? So how can we hone in on some of those skills that they will need? Transfer of skills, exactly. Oh, fosters conferencing. I love that. Okay, so outside of the micros, minis, and macros, we also know that students can demonstrate their proficiency in writing skills in more than one way. And we break those down into what we call a generative experience and an evaluative experience. Now, it's pretty self-explanatory, but your generative experiences are those that students will generate from scratch their own writing through their own thinking. Your evaluative experiences are those in which students provide feedback to another author. They might examine mentor text, do some sort of revision, or self-evaluation. So generative could look like a short summary paragraph or an essay, text-dependent writing in your classroom instruction, creative pieces, projects, infographics. And then your evaluative is that feedback aspect or the revision aspect, which is a huge point in our written and oral communication standards, as you guys mentioned earlier when we were looking at the standards map, that students do need to know how to revise and edit and provide feedback. So when we give you your strategies and examples today, you'll notice that they are actually color-coded into which ones are generative and which ones are evaluative. So you can be thinking through that lens as well. I'm going to start with an example This is a 6th grade micro example. So this would take less than one class period, and it's called But What If You Had? Okay. So this is what your resources are going to look like. They all follow this same structure. It'll give you the standard or indicator that is addressed. Again, this might not be an exhaustive list. There could be other things that you could teach through this. It'll give you an objective. For this one, students will practice writing a narrative text that describes an imagined experience. Oftentimes, narratives, when they are used in the classroom, are just personal narratives, right? Write about what you know. Write about what you know. But students on the SC Ready, in the younger grades, or just in general, they're going to have to write about imagined experiences. And sometimes that's hard. So this specifically focuses on your imagined experience. So you want to give students a scenario that they most likely have not personally experienced. Skydiving, an African safari, an Olympic gold medal, something that you're fairly certain that they've never encountered. And you're going to ask them to describe, say, hey, I would like for you to describe the time that you went bull riding. And 9 times out of 10, your students are going to say, I've never been bull riding, Miss McCormick. What do you mean? And your response will be, but what if you had? What if you had? And from there, ask them to complete a 5-10 minute quick write describing the scenario as if they had personally experienced it. And this really kind of forces them out of that, like, oh, well, I don't know if that's true or not, or I've never done that, so I don't know. And to really tap into their imagination and their creativity. I kind of got this idea from a mentor, a coach that I worked with, who, when students would say, I don't know, and she would say, but what if you did know? And then all of a sudden they had the answer, right? So it's just asking students to think more creatively, very quickly. And this could turn into a longer narrative, but it doesn't have to, right? It's just that idea of writing about things that are imagined. So what we're going to do now is give you the opportunity to explore some examples, of micro, mini, macros. You have this, I believe, on your landing page, and your job is to look through these examples. You'll notice that they are color-coded. Generative is the kind of red, and then evaluative is the gray. If you were with us in the elementary section, you know that Mandy color-coded hers purple and orange, and I couldn't have that. So I had to change mine to garnet and black. But you are going to have some time to go through these, to look at them, and I want you to consider what could you use right now as they are? What could you share with someone else? Maybe there's a 6th grade activity that you're like, oh my gosh, that my fellow 6th grade teacher down the hall could use that. And what could you adapt? Because if you think about the vertical articulation and how really they are just nuanced, most of these, if not all of them, could be adapted to fit a different grade level. Okay. So that's a good question about, do you still recommend writing a traditional essay? And the answer is sure. There's no one's saying don't write essays, that's for sure. We just want to make sure students have a variety of experiences. These can be used as scaffolds to work your way up to an essay. But the standards also the indicators don't include the word essay, particularly like 5-paragraph essay. We want students to be able to write thoroughly with completeness. But that doesn't necessarily have to look like 5 paragraphs or 3 paragraphs. But they should be able to write with completeness. Melissa, the origin stories was my favorite too. I enjoyed looking those up. Yes, Shelley, and like the associative letter book, that's essentially like a mini essay on every single page, right? All right, so I'm seeing that there are some things that you feel like you could use, share, or adapt. I also will share, I think this is in your landing page as well, but I'm also going to share your elementary document that has elementary examples, particularly for those of you who teach sixth grade. You may be able to find resources here. And then I'm also going to link what we are calling our master document, but right now it just has the high school examples. We are going to take all of our examples for all of the grade bands and put them into one single document for you. You'll notice that this high school document has it at the top by mode of writing, and then at the second page is by course. So you're welcome to look through any of those and find any that you could adapt. You'll see that we actually have already adapted some of them for the varying grade levels because we wanted you to see how that is possible. The elementary, again, just ignore that it's orange and purple, but it is color coded and organized by your mode of writing. And then you have your middle level, which is color coded and organized by grade on the second page and by mode of writing at the top. So those are 3 documents full of writing activities that you can immediately put into place or adapt them or share them to be useful in providing your students with a variety of writing tasks. We are now going to wrap it up, go into clarity and closure. Today's purpose was to explain the expectations for writing. That should say grades 6-8. As we help make writing instruction clear, intentional, and manageable. So my question for you now is, how did we meet that purpose for today? Or did we meet that purpose for today?